So after doing the video the other day on focus, there were some questions that came up which I think are really good questions in regards to focus, because when I talk about focus, relaxation, balance, these virtues, patience, they're kind of like meta habits, okay? What I've noticed is, generally speaking, not everybody, but the majority of people, when they approach things like self-improvement, are looking for, techniques and tools which they can apply from the way of thinking that they already have. And the problem with that is that there's always a ceiling on that. You're always bound by the edge of that frequency. And so, like the old saying goes, if you have a golf ball size consciousness, then you'll have a golf ball size reality. If you have a basketball size consciousness, you're going to have a basketball size reality. And these virtues pop you up into a larger reality, which gives you more access to more things, more perceptions, more potentials in the field of infinite possibility. And so one of the questions was, when I start practicing focusing, I've got all these interests, I've got day-to-day life, I've got family, I've got relationships, I've got a job, I've got hobbies, and how do I focus on these things long enough to get good at them? And that comes under more of a time management thing, which is another skill altogether, which is a key component in focus, just like endurance is a key component in focusing. So to give you an example, there was a guy on YouTube he calls himself the tech lead, and he worked for Google and Facebook, and he does all these videos on hacks that you can do through your computer, obviously, but now he's getting into decentralized finance and showing you how to do that with cryptocurrency and invest and all that sort of stuff. That aside, though, he would get a lot of questions from people who were wanting to learn coding and programming, and they would say, what skills do I need? And he says, really, the only skill you need is to be able to sit in front of the screen for hours on end and learn things. More time you spend in front of the screen learning and reading, the quicker it's going to take before you get some skill, or something to that effect. And I mean, compounding with that is also practicing what you learn. You need to apply it, and that's why in the context of what he was talking about, there are all these websites where you can practice your skills, or they set you tasks where you can build things, just like you would in a woodwork class. If any of you remember woodwork or metalwork, the first thing they probably get you to make is a birdhouse or a pencil case or something basic. You've got all these things that you would build, and they're not so you can have a pencil case or a birdhouse, because they're pretty mundane objects. But what they do is they get you time on the tools, and you learn some principles and fundamentals, and you get a bit of practice under your belt, a bit of experience, and then you can start applying that to greater levels of complexity of objects. And so this is a kind of thing, what we're talking about is we're cultivating a skill, a virtue, which is focus. And it doesn't really matter what we do to get that skill, like in terms of what we focus on, as long as we're practicing it consistently. And so another part of what goes into focus and many other virtues, cultivating virtues and skills and abilities, is a discipline mindset, where you're going to show up and practice doing these things consistently. Now, the first question is like, yeah, but the first point of resistance is, but I don't have time. I've got all these things. It's like, remember, we're not setting aside time to practice something like another thing we have to do. I mentioned candle focus in the last video because it was also illustrating the principle and fundamental of practicing the virtue of focus, just like getting the pencil case in woodwork. And once you understand why you're doing it, the what and the why, the how becomes easier, I once heard said. And so you say, okay, I've got all these things that I want to focus on, that I have to focus on, things maybe I don't want to focus on, but I need to get through life. And that's great, because you want to keep the mind interested and out of going into fatigue. So this is where endurance comes in. If you're focusing on even something you like, you pick the subject. You might be cooking. You might love cooking, and if you're just cooking all the time, then it can become a chore. Just like, young guys I know who want to become competition fighters, or they want to become world champions in a particular martial art, example jiu-jitsu, which is awesome and cool, and got no problem with that. But even as a young guy doing that, with not as many responsibilities as, say, an adult or a parent, if that's your sole focus and goal in life, then you're training 5 and 6 days a week. You might be doing 2 to 3 sessions a day, and obviously you're resting and stuff like that, but it starts becoming more of a job than a joy. And then you can get muscle fatigue, you can get bored doing it, and you start thinking, oh, what am I doing? I'm missing out on all this stuff. So the same goes for if you've got a health goal, and there's only probably a handful of exercises you actually need to do to get fit and healthy and to grow muscle mass and all that sort of stuff. But if you look on YouTube or the App Store, there's literally thousands of hours of different exercises and apps to help you stay on track. And basically there's just 1,000 different ways to do the same thing. And so if you've got all these things like hobbies and interests and things you have to do and things that you don't want to do but you need to do, and then you've got relationships and family and kids and pets, that's another thing. You have ample opportunity to practice focus in a multitude of ways. And so this is really good because you can continually practice focusing on many, many subjects, which is going to rewire your brain to focus on all sorts of things all the time. Now, focus is like a camera too. There's a up close and personal focus, there's a zoom in focus, and there's a zoom out focus, and all the degrees in between. So you can practice paying attention to all these different subjects and skills and hobbies and tasks and people, to places, times, events, and you can practice focusing throughout the entire spectrum. Now, there's an argument to say, well, whenever you're sort of living, then you're focusing, and you are. It's just like people talk about, being in a hypnotic state. People are in hypnotic states all the time. I don't think there is a state that is not hypnotic, but there are definitely varying degrees and depths, and you can do all sorts of different things in those different states. So the other thing is, while you're focusing on one thing like focus, which is kind of this meta core ability, skill, virtue, you are inadvertently and accidentally and indirectly going to practice a bunch of other virtues, skills, abilities, and tools. And when you start doing this and applying it to all areas of your life in various degrees, then you can, in theory at least, I mean, there is uptime and downtime, but not going into that at the moment, you can pretty much be doing a continuous, constant improvement on yourself in all levels of life. And I think it was mentioned by Jordan Peterson. He says incremental improvement over time is unstoppable. And to be able to get into that mindset, to be able to, let's say, train that way, you have to give up the idea that you're going to have these whiz-bang wow breakthroughs, right? Because a whiz-bang breakthrough is something you can sort of bring about if you're focusing on one particular skill, or like a health goal. You know, you can train for a couple of weeks and a couple of months, or a year, or a couple of years, and you can hit your fitness goals and you can see a body transformation. But this is more like, you know, your approach is, I'm going to be fit and healthy for the rest of my life. You know, from here on in, I'm not going to have any more injuries. I'm going to take my time and pace myself and allow my body to grow and adapt over time, through time. And I'm going to do this pretty much as a lifestyle, not as something else I do or I schedule into my day and my life. It's going to be something that I blend into my life, and it becomes who I am. You know, there's this argument about overtraining and resting and days off and no days off. And I knew this guy, Nippon. I still know him, obviously, but I'm going back into the past memory here. And this guy, he's super fit, he's ripped all year round, and I don't really see him like focusing on being that way. It's just like who he is and part of his lifestyle. And yes, he's always, you know, focusing on eating properly, but if you go out and you're at a restaurant or whatever, he'll just eat whatever's on the menu. I've seen him snack on junk food before. It's no big deal. And he doesn't actually go to the gym, but he's constantly moving and training and working his body on different things. And he's down at the monkey bars at Bondi Beach practicing, you know, certain gymnastic moves. And he's not a gymnast. He's not if anything, you'd be a parkour practitioner, movement practitioner, energetic artist. And he's just constantly moving. Like it's almost like he's fidgeting, you know. He comes to my house and he'll pick up a weight and just start playing with it, and not really doing an exercise, but like using it to see what he can get his body to do with that as an apparatus. And so if you're using your life as an apparatus to train yourself in all these virtues, and you're doing it constantly and consistently, it's going to feel like nothing's happening for a long time. And actually, when you start integrating it into your lifestyle, it's just going to feel like it's just who you are. It's just what you do in a day. And, you know, your life's going to start incrementally improving over time, so subtly and slowly that you're not going to be like, wow, this is such a great thing that's happened to me. You're just going to wake up one day and go, you know, and someone's going to say, how are you? And you're going to say, you know what, life's really good. Life's great. Like, there's so many good things happening in my life. There's so many new opportunities opening up for me. There's so many little progressions that that are happening to me and I'm having all the time, that it's just kind of keeping me in this constant state of feeling good and constant state of, you know, incremental improvement. And like I said, that becomes unstoppable, becomes a habit, right? And so all these virtues, these meta skills, and they sit up here, and then they become, they go into your value system, and then your value systems, you create beliefs out of those, and those beliefs start extruding your energy and projecting your energy out. Maybe then you have some tools and techniques that you use beyond that. And when you're doing all this, right, then it just starts to sort of flow with you. It's not until you look back and you go, oh geez, this is who I used to be. Who I used to be can't do what I am doing now. Who I am doing now, it seems effortless, but before it seemed difficult. And it's not until you run into someone who is where you have been that you kind of realize and go, oh yeah, gosh, I almost forgot what it was like to have that perspective, those challenges, the frustration, the tension. Now things seem a lot more enjoyable and a lot more fun. And for me to, start to really go into my edges and explore my boundaries, I have to kind of seek them out, because the edges are really supple and subtle now. They're not so obvious that I'm banging my head against the wall. And so just to recap, a bird just landed on the car. Just to recap, when you're focusing on focusing, you're cultivating virtues, skills, attributes, and it's kind of like this magnetism you're creating around yourself. When you pay attention to something long enough, it attracts more of itself to it. They say where attention goes, energy flows. And you create this sort of gravity around certain frequencies of energy, certain vibrations or amplitudes of energy. And while you're doing all this, ultimately you're learning how to tune your energy into all these different possibilities and potentials and scales and vibrations. When I say vibrations, I mean like, volumes of energy, from small volumes to large volumes, from small amplitudes to large amplitudes. And then you can start playing with proof of concepts, that if you can make it on this small, low amplitude, low volume scale, then it stands to reason, with a bit of practice and some time on the tools and some experience, then you could upscale that to larger and larger things. And within a very short period of time, just like the person with a fitness goal, you can have a life transformation, an energetic transformation, not just a physical aesthetic transformation or a financial transformation. You can really rearrange all sorts of things in your life, and ultimately your whole perception of reality, which hopefully will be a lot less limiting than the one that you used to have. You can start to behave more authentically, you can show up more confidently, not waste so much time pussyfooting around and maneuvering, but just going directly for what you want and living life on your terms. So hope that helps, and there's a bit more clarity, another thing that you want to cultivate by investigating and doing your own research, and not just researching, but actually trying it out and practicing it and doing it long enough to see if there's any merit in it for you. And thanks for your attention, thanks for watching, thanks for your focus, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye for now.